The SEAL commander said no one could make that shot. Then she shot 3 enemy generals in the head. Staff Sergeant Sarah Hayes crouched behind the rocky outcropping, adjusting the scope on her Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle for the 100th time. Her jet black hair was pulled back in a tight bun beneath her ghillie suit hood, and her emerald green eyes remained fixed on the target area, 247 yards away, through the high-powered optics. To the SEAL team positioned around her, she looked like just another Army sniper providing overwatch support. What they didn't know was that Staff Sergeant Sarah Hayes was about to attempt the most impossible shot in modern military history. But Sarah Hayes was far from ordinary. For 5 years, she had been the Army's most closely guarded secret, a sniper whose accuracy defied physics and whose kill record was classified at levels that didn't officially exist. Her callsign Shadow had been earned after she eliminated 23 high-value targets in a single deployment without ever being detected. Marine Scout snipers called her a legend. Army Rangers spoke of her in whispers. Even Delta Force operators showed respect when her name came up. But today she was working with Navy SEALs who had no idea they were in the presence of the military's most lethal precision shooter. Afghanistan 2025. The mountainous terrain stretched out before them like a great stone ocean frozen in time. The team had been in position since 0400, monitoring the compound that intelligence had identified as a gathering place for high-level Taliban leadership. What had begun as a routine surveillance operation had suddenly transformed into something far more significant. 3 of the most wanted terrorist leaders in the world had unexpectedly converged in one location, creating an opportunity that might never come again. Commander Matthew Reeves scanned the compound through his high-powered binoculars, his weathered face revealing nothing of the storm of calculations happening behind his steel blue eyes. 23 years of special operations had taught him the value of patience, but also the importance of recognizing a strategic opportunity when it presented itself. At 47, he was older than most active SEAL team leaders, but his experience made him invaluable for the most critical missions. His square jaw tightened as he considered the tactical implications of what they were witnessing. Hayes, Commander Reeves called out, keeping his voice low as he moved to her position. "What's your assessment of the target area?" Sarah continued studying the compound through her scope, noting defensive positions, guard rotations, and structural weaknesses with the methodical precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. 3 primary buildings. Main structure appears to be the meeting location, she replied without taking her eye from the scope. Heavy security presence. Approximately 22 hostiles visible on perimeter patrol patterns. Any sign of the high-value targets we're supposed to identify. Negative on visual confirmation of specific individuals, but thermal imaging suggests multiple heat signatures concentrated in the primary building's upper floor. Meeting is definitely in progress. Estimate 12 to 15 personnel inside. Commander Reeves nodded and moved to coordinate with his team's forward observer. The SEAL unit consisted of 8 operators, all veterans of multiple combat deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and classified operations in other theaters. They had been observing the compound for 3 hours, documenting personnel movements, communication patterns, and security protocols. The radio crackled to life. "Overwatch Actual, this is HQ. Be advised we have positive ID on 3 primary targets at your location. Mahmoud Al-Farsi, Hassan Al-Ghazali, and Abdul Rahman. Repeat confirmation on the presence of all 3 primary targets. Stand by for updated orders." Reeves' expression shifted immediately from routine surveillance mode to high-stakes tactical assessment. 3 enemy generals represented targets of enormous strategic value. Their simultaneous elimination could cripple enemy command structure, disrupt coordination between multiple terrorist cells, and potentially end organized resistance throughout the entire region. "What's JTSOC's directive?" Reeves asked the communications specialist, knowing that the answer would fundamentally change their mission parameters. "They're requesting immediate assessment of elimination possibilities. If we can take them out simultaneously, we have full authorization to proceed. Priority Alpha clearance, sir." Reeves looked through his binoculars at the distant compound, calculating distances and angles, with the tactical expertise of 23 years in special operations. The compound sat on an elevated position 247 yards from their concealed observation post. 247 yards was far beyond the effective range of any weapon system in their standard loadout. Even the most advanced sniper rifles had maximum effective ranges of 1,500 to 1,800 yards under perfect conditions. At 247 yards, environmental factors like wind patterns, humidity variations, and bullet drop made accurate shooting virtually impossible by conventional military standards. Sarah continued observing through her scope, but she was also listening carefully to the SEAL team's tactical discussion. Through her advanced optics and laser range-finding equipment, she had a crystal-clear view of the target building. More importantly, she could see three men in distinctive clothing standing near large windows on the building's upper floor engaged in animated discussion over what appeared to be tactical maps. "Sir, negative on close approach," Reeves said into his radio. "Range is prohibitive for effective engagement. We'd need to move at least 800 yards closer, which would compromise our concealment and almost certainly trigger their perimeter security response." Sarah made calculations in her head that the SEAL team couldn't see. Wind speed at ground level was 12 mph from the northwest, but her meteorological training told her that wind patterns at altitude would be different. Air density was lower than standard due to their elevation. Temperature was 82 degrees Fahrenheit with 31% humidity, conditions that would affect bullet trajectory in specific calculable ways. "Commander Reeves," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying an undertone of absolute confidence, "I have visual confirmation on three high-value targets. Enemy leaders upper floor northwest facing windows, range 247 yards. Reeves crawled over to her position and looked through his own spotting scope, squinting to make out the distant figures. "I see them," he confirmed with a mixture of frustration and resignation. "Christ, they're right there in the open, but they might as well be on another planet. No conventional weapon system can reach them from this range. Not with any accuracy." Sarah made a decision that would define not only her military career, but potentially change the strategic balance of the entire conflict. "Sir, I can eliminate all three targets." Commander Reeves looked at her with a mixture of surprise, skepticism, and the kind of professional assessment that comes from 23 years of evaluating impossible tactical situations. "Hayes, that's over 200 yards. The world record for a confirmed sniper kill is 475 yards. And that was achieved under perfect conditions with multiple ranging shots in ideal weather. You're talking about three separate precision shots at extreme range against human-sized targets." "I understand the distance and the tactical requirements, sir." Reeves' experience told him this was fantasy, but something in Sarah's voice, a quiet certainty that he had only heard from the most elite operators, made him pause. "Do you understand the physics involved? At that range, you're dealing with bullet drop of over 400 inches, wind drift that could throw your shots off by multiple feet, atmospheric pressure variations, and environmental factors that change by the second. My best sniper, a guy who's been shooting professionally for 14 years, wouldn't attempt that shot." Sarah looked through her scope again, her mind automatically calculating factors that standard military doctrine didn't even consider. Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, gyroscopic drift from bullet spin, temperature gradients at different altitudes, barometric pressure variations that would affect air density along the bullet's flight path. "Sir, with respect, your sniper is using conventional techniques for conventional ranges," Sarah said calmly. "This requires unconventional methods." Reeves stared at her for a long moment. In his 23 years with the SEALs, he had worked with some of the world's most elite shooters, Marine Corps scout snipers, Army Special Forces marksmen, even CIA paramilitary specialists. None of them would have claimed they could make three consecutive precision shots at 200 yards against human targets. "Hayes, that's not confidence. That's mathematical impossibility. The probability calculations for hitting a human-sized target at that range even once approach zero." Sarah set down her scope and looked directly at the SEAL commander with the steady gaze of someone who had just changed the course of a war. "Sir, I need to show you something." She reached into her tactical kit and pulled out a weatherproof notebook filled with handwritten calculations, diagrams, and shooting data that looked more like advanced physics research than standard military documentation. Page after page of ballistic mathematics, environmental compensation formulas, and precision shooting data that incorporated variables most snipers had never considered. "This documents every precision shot I've taken over 1,000 yards, she explained, pointing to meticulously recorded data points. "Each one accounts for all variables, including those most shooters don't factor in." Reeves flipped through the pages with growing amazement. The level of mathematical precision was beyond anything he'd seen in 23 years of special operations. "Hayes, where did you learn this? This isn't standard sniper school curriculum." Sarah hesitated, waiting how much to reveal. "My father was a ballistics expert for the Pentagon. My mother taught applied physics at MIT. I grew up calculating trajectories before I could ride a bike. There was more to her story than that much more, but now wasn't the time. But this is still theoretical, Reeves argued, though, with less conviction. Hitting a target once at extreme range is already pushing the boundaries of possibility. Hitting three in rapid succession is precisely what this mission requires, sir. Reeves closed the notebook, his mind racing through the tactical options. They had an unprecedented opportunity to eliminate three of the most dangerous terrorist leaders in a single operation. But if they failed, the consequences would be severe. Hayes, if you miss even one shot, we compromise the entire mission. They'll know exactly where we are. Security will be tripled throughout the region, and we'll lose any future intelligence opportunities in this area. Understood completely, sir. And if you're captured during extraction, this mission never existed. No backup, no cavalry, no official recognition, no government acknowledgement. Copy that, sir. Reeves made a decision that went against every tactical manual, 23 years of SEAL experience, and basic common sense about the limitations of small arms effectiveness. Take the shots. Sarah immediately began her pre-engagement routine, a precisely choreographed ritual she had perfected over hundreds of extreme range eliminations. Environmental assessment came first. Wind speed was 12 mph from the northwest at ground level, but her training in meteorology told her that wind patterns would be significantly different at the 100-foot altitude differential between her position and the target. Air temperature was 82 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 31%, atmospheric pressure 29.91 inches of mercury, slightly higher than sea level standard, which would affect bullet trajectory in measurable ways. She made microscopic adjustments to her scope's elevation and windage turrets, incorporating calculations that accounted for the Coriolis effect at extreme range. At 2,000 plus yards, the Earth's rotation would actually influence bullet flight path by several inches, a factor that most snipers never needed to consider. Through her scope, Sarah could see all three targets with crystal clarity. Mahmoud al-Farsi, the enemy's strategic operations commander and architect of multiple terrorist attacks against coalition forces. Hassan al-Ghazali, head of logistics and supply operations, whose elimination would cripple enemy materials support. Abdul Rahman, the intelligence chief, whose death would blind enemy communication networks and coordination capabilities. All three men were standing near the windows, engaged in animated discussion over what appeared to be battle plans spread across a large table. They had no concept that 247 yards away, one of the world's most lethal precision shooters was calculating their elimination with mathematical certainty. But as Sarah prepared her weapon, memories flooded her mind, pulling her back to where it all began. Boston, Massachusetts, 15 years earlier. 10-year-old Sarah Hayes stood in her father's study, fascinated by the complex equations covering the whiteboard wall, where Dr. William Hayes, a renowned ballistics expert who had revolutionized military ammunition design, watched his daughter with quiet pride as she studied his work. "Do you understand what you're looking at, Sarah?" he asked, testing her. "It's a model for predicting bullet path under variable wind conditions," she replied without hesitation. "But your formula doesn't account for the compressibility of air at different temperatures." William Hayes raised an eyebrow, impressed by his daughter's insight. At 10 years old, Sarah was already demonstrating an understanding of physics that many college students struggled with. "Show me," he challenged, handing her a marker. Without hesitation, Sarah added a correction to his equation, implementing a variable that accounted for the very factor he'd been struggling with for weeks. William stared at her modification, checking the math in his head. It was perfect. "How did you—" he began, but Sarah simply shrugged. "It just makes sense," she said, as if everyone could see complex physics equations as clearly as she saw the world around her. That night at dinner, William discussed their daughter's remarkable abilities with his wife, Professor Catherine Hayes, one of MIT's most respected physicists. "She doesn't just understand the math, Catherine," William explained, his voice low so Sarah couldn't hear from the next room. "She feels it. She sees patterns and relationships that even I miss. It's like she instinctively comprehends the underlying structure of physical reality." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen it in my lab. I took her in last week and she corrected an error in my graduate student's experimental design that none of us had caught. We need to nurture this gift, William, and protect it," he added quietly. "You know what certain agencies would do if they discovered someone with her particular talents." Little did they know that Sarah had slipped into the hallway and was listening to every word. Even at 10 years old, she understood that she was different, and that this difference made her both special and potentially valuable to people her parents clearly feared. 2 years later, William took Sarah to the family's property in rural New Hampshire. It was her 12th birthday, and he had promised her a special gift. They walked through the autumn woods until they reached a small clearing with a makeshift shooting range. Targets were set up at various distances from 25 yards to 300 yards. Your grandfather was a Marine sniper in Korea, William explained as he unpacked a small, custom-made rifle from its case. He taught me to shoot when I was about your age. I've modified this for you. It's a Remington 700 and 223 adjusted for your frame. Sarah took the rifle reverently, feeling its weight and balance. Something about it felt natural in her hands, like an extension of her own body. Mom knows about this, she asked skeptically. William's smile was conspiratorial. Your mother and I agree on many things, but not everything. Some skills are worth having even if you hope never to need them. He showed her how to hold the rifle, how to breathe, how to squeeze rather than pull the trigger. Sarah absorbed every instruction like a sponge. By the end of the afternoon, she was consistently hitting targets at 100 yards, an extraordinary accomplishment for a first-time shooter, especially one so young. You're a natural, William said, pride evident in his voice. But remember, Sarah, this skill, like your gift for mathematics, comes with a responsibility. A bullet once fired cannot be called back. The same is true of knowledge once applied. Sarah nodded solemnly, understanding even then the weight of what her father was telling her. There's someone I want you to meet next month, William said as they packed up the rifle. An old friend from my Pentagon days, James Wilson. He retired as a colonel, but he was once the best shooter in the entire military. If you're interested in developing this skill further, he's the one who can teach you. Is he as good at math as he is at shooting? Sarah asked. William laughed. Colonel Wilson might not win any math competitions, but he understands something even more valuable. He knows how to blend science with instinct, how to turn knowledge into action. In his prime, he could make shots that defied the ballistics tables, not because he ignored physics, but because he understood that sometimes the human element transcends what the numbers tell us is possible. 1 month later, Sarah met Colonel James Old Ghost Wilson for the first time. At 72, the retired Army colonel still stood ramrod straight, his weathered face telling the story of decades spent in harsh environments around the world. His piercing blue eyes seemed to evaluate everything they looked at, including the 12-year-old girl introduced to him as William's daughter. Wilson had been a legendary figure in military circles, a sniper with over 100 confirmed kills during the Korean War and subsequent classified operations throughout the Cold War. Though his exploits were largely unknown to the public within special operations communities, his name was spoken with reverence. So you want to learn to shoot, young lady? Wilson asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. I want to understand it, Sarah replied. The physics, the variables, the human factors. I want to know why some people can make shots that others say are impossible. Wilson's eyes narrowed slightly, then he looked at William with a raised eyebrow. She's direct. I like that, he said before turning back to Sarah. Most kids want to learn to shoot because they think it's cool or exciting. You talk about it like a science problem. Isn't it both? Sarah asked. For the first time, Wilson smiled. Smart too, yes, it's both, and that's what most people never understand. The greatest shooters in history weren't just gifted physically. They understood the intersection of science and art. They could calculate and feel simultaneously. Over the next 6 years, whenever Wilson was in the Boston area, he would take Sarah to remote locations to train her. He taught her not just marksmanship, but observation, patience, and the psychological aspects of precision shooting. Under his tutelage, Sarah developed skills that went far beyond what even her father had anticipated. By 18, she could consistently hit targets at ranges that experienced military snipers would consider at the edge of possibility. But more impressively, she could articulate exactly why each shot succeeded or failed, breaking down the complex interaction of environmental factors, equipment limitations, and human performance variables. What neither her father nor Wilson fully appreciated was how Sarah's mathematical genius was transforming conventional shooting wisdom. She wasn't just applying the lessons she was taught. She was developing entirely new approaches to long-range accuracy, creating mental models that accounted for variables no one else even considered relevant. Wow. On September 12, 2001, one day after the attacks that shook America to its core, Sarah Hayes walked into a military recruitment office in Boston. At 18, she had just started her freshman year at MIT, following in her mother's footsteps. But the images of the previous day had awakened something in her, a sense of purpose, a sense that her unusual abilities might serve a greater cause than academic achievement. "I want to enlist," she told the Army recruiter, a staff sergeant who looked up from his paperwork with mild surprise at the slender young woman standing before him. "College isn't working out," he asked, making the most common assumption about well-dressed young people who suddenly wanted to join the military. "I'm at MIT, full scholarship," Sarah replied. "But after yesterday, sitting in physics lectures doesn't seem like enough." The recruiter's expression changed slightly. He'd seen many young people come through his door in the last 24 hours, all driven by the same surge of patriotism and anger. "Your parents okay with this decision?" Sarah hesitated. "They'll understand, eventually." She didn't mention that her father had served or that she'd been trained by one of the most accomplished snipers in American military history. She didn't talk about her mathematical abilities or her extraordinary marksmanship skills. Sarah wanted to be evaluated on her own merits to earn her place rather than have it given to her because of connections or perceived potential. 3 weeks later, after a tearful argument with her parents and a surprisingly supportive phone call from Colonel Wilson, Sarah Hayes shipped out to basic training. She was simply another recruit, anonymous, in a sea of young Americans answering their country's call after the most devastating attack on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor. But her anonymity didn't last long. During weapons qualification, Sarah didn't just pass. She set a post record. Her drill sergeants watched in amazement as she hit target after target with mechanical precision. When they moved to long-range shooting, the range master initially thought the targeting system was malfunctioning because her groupings were impossibly tight. Hayes, her drill sergeant, said after watching her outshoot combat veterans twice her age, "Where the hell did you learn to shoot like that?" "My dad taught me the basics," she replied simply. "I just apply the physics, drill sergeant." Word of the female recruit with extraordinary shooting skills quickly traveled up the chain of command. By the time she completed basic training, Sarah had been flagged for assessment by the Army's specialized training programs. That's when Colonel Wilson reappeared in her life, though now in an official capacity. "They're calling you the natural," Wilson told her when they met in a nondescript office at Fort Benning. "But we both know there's nothing natural about what you do. It's the result of knowledge practice in that special brain of yours." "What happens now?" Sarah asked. "Now you have a choice," Wilson said, his expression serious. "You can go the conventional route, sniper school deployment, distinguished service. You'll be excellent, maybe even set some records. Or you can join a program that doesn't officially exist. A program I've been helping to design for individuals with your unique combination of skills. We call it Project Chimera." Sarah studied her mentor's face. "What exactly is Project Chimera?" "The future of precision engagement," Wilson replied. "A small cadre of shooters who operate at extremes conventional military doctrine considers impossible. No fancy technology, no experimental enhancements. Just the perfect fusion of human ability and mathematical precision. The ultimate expression of the sniper's art. And if I join, your official record will show a standard career progression. Your actual operations will never be acknowledged. You'll make shots that change history, and history will never know your name." Sarah thought about the path that had led her here. The childhood spent decoding the physical laws of the universe through mathematics. The years of training with Wilson and her father. The sense of purpose that had driven her to enlist after 9/11. "When do we start?" she asked. Wilson smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "Just understand what you're signing up for, Sarah. This isn't a glory assignment. The greatest shots in history will be ones no one ever hears about. Can you live with that kind of anonymity?" "It's not about recognition," Sarah said firmly. "It's about making a difference." "Good," Wilson nodded. "Because where we're going, the only validation you'll ever get is knowing that you did something no one else could have done. Something that needed doing." 1 week later, Sarah Hayes disappeared into a training program that didn't officially exist, beginning a journey that would ultimately lead her to a rocky outcropping in Afghanistan, preparing to take a shot that defied mathematical possibility. Listen. The SEAL team watched in fascination and disbelief as Sarah made final micro-adjustments to her rifle system. Commander Reeves was tracking the targets through his spotting scope, while Chief Peterson maintained communication with JSOC Command. The other operators maintained security perimeters and monitored for enemy patrol activity. "Range 247 yards, Sarah whispered into her tactical radio. 3 high-value targets, northwest windows, upper floor, atmospheric conditions optimal, engaging in 15 seconds. Sarah aligned her crosshairs on the first target, Mahmoud Al-Farsi, standing closest to the leftmost window. She calculated the precise holdover required for bullet drop at that extreme range, compensated for wind drift based on her meteorological assessment, and adjusted for the slight upward angle of the shot. Her finger found the trigger with the gentle, consistent pressure that separated amateur shooters from lethal professionals. The Barrett's trigger had a clean, crisp break that she had tested thousands of times. Sarah exhaled exactly half her breath and held it, reaching the moment of perfect physiological stillness that made impossible shots achievable. But just before she squeezed the trigger, something caught her attention. A subtle shift in Al Farsi's posture, a familiar gesture that triggered a memory. 5 years earlier, Kandahar province, a similar mission but with a different team. Captain Michael Reynolds, her spotter and closest friend in the Chimera program, had been tracking a high-level bomb maker. The intelligence had been solid, the shot setup perfect. But when they extracted after the successful elimination, they walked into an ambush. Reynolds had pushed her out of the way of an incoming RPG, taking the full force of the blast himself. His last words to her, spoken through bloody lips as the life faded from his eyes: "Make every shot count, Shadow. Every damn shot." She later learned that their position had been compromised by a double agent within Afghan intelligence. The same double agent who reported directly to Mahmoud al-Farsi, the man now standing in her crosshairs. Sarah refocused, pushing the memory aside. This wasn't about personal vengeance. It was about the mission. But knowing al-Farsi's history, understanding the threat he posed to American forces and innocent civilians, only reinforced the importance of what she was about to do. The rifle fired with tremendous force the .50 caliber muzzle blast, creating a signature that would be heard for miles. The massive bullet left the barrel at 2,910 feet per second, beginning a 2.37-second journey that would cover 2,247 yards while dropping over 420 inches and drifting 19 inches due to calculated wind conditions and Coriolis effect. Through her scope, Sarah tracked the bullet's impact with professional detachment and immediately shifted to acquire the second target. She could feel the weight of the moment, the culmination of everything she had trained for, everything Colonel Wilson had prepared her for. In the next 12 seconds, she would either make history or fail catastrophically. The fate of countless future operations, perhaps even the strategic balance in the region, rested on her ability to do what Commander Reeves and conventional military wisdom deemed impossible. But Sarah Hayes wasn't conventional. And as the first bullet completed its arcing journey toward Mahmoud al-Farsi, she was already calculating the next impossible shot. The SEAL commander had said no one could make that shot. Sarah Hayes was about to prove him wrong. The first bullet found its mark. Through her scope, Sarah witnessed Mahmoud al-Farsi collapse instantly. One moment alive, the next, a confirmation of physics precisely calculated. The men around him froze in confusion, providing Sarah the critical seconds needed for her next shot. Through her scope, Sarah witnessed the impact with professional detachment. The other men in the room froze momentarily, their brains struggling to process the sudden, inexplicable collapse of their commander. That momentary confusion was crucial. It gave Sarah the seconds she needed to acquire her second target. Hassan al-Ghazali had instinctively turned toward his fallen comrade, presenting a perfect profile for Sarah's scope. She adjusted for the slightly different position, recalculating wind drift and elevation in an instant. The Barrett's massive recoil had barely settled as she reacquired her sight picture. Commander Reeves watched through his spotting scope, his expression shifting from skepticism to astonishment as al-Farsi dropped. 23 years of special operations experience had taught him to temper expectations, to never count on best-case scenarios. Yet here he was witnessing what could only be described as a miracle of ballistics. "Target one down," Sarah whispered, her voice eerily calm as her finger found the trigger again. "Engaging target two." The second shot thundered across the valley, sending another .50 caliber round on its impossibly long journey. Reeves could scarcely believe what he was seeing. One kill at this distance would be the shot of a lifetime. 2 consecutive kills approached the realm of statistical impossibility. As Sarah's second bullet traveled toward its target, her mind remained absolutely focused on the task. But beneath that concentration, memories continued to surface. 10. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Project Chimera Training Facility. 5 years earlier. Again, Colonel Wilson instructed, his voice betraying no impatience, despite this being Sarah's 47th attempt at the exercise. Sarah had been in the Chimera program for 6 months. The training was unlike anything in conventional military doctrine. While standard sniper school taught shooting out to 1,000 yards, Chimera pushed the boundaries to 1,500, then 2,000, rewriting the rules of what was considered possible. The round went exactly where I aimed it, Sarah protested mildly, checking her calculations again. The wind shifted 2.3 miles per hour during flight. Wilson nodded. And what does that tell you? Sarah frowned. That I needed to account for potential wind changes during the bullet's flight time, not just conditions at the moment of firing. Exactly. At extreme distances, you're not just shooting through space, you're shooting through time. The world changes between trigger pull and impact. You have to predict those changes. Wilson walked over to the specialized weather station they'd set up. Look at the barometric pressure trends for the last hour. There's a pattern, small oscillations every 12 minutes or so. You need to time your shots to account for those oscillations. Sarah studied the data, seeing the pattern immediately. I never would have considered that variable. Most shooters don't, Wilson said. They treat the atmosphere as static. But at these distances, even small atmospheric changes have significant effects. He placed a weathered hand on her shoulder. Your mathematical gifts are extraordinary, Sarah. But mathematics assumes fixed variables. The real world is constantly in flux. Sarah nodded, absorbing the lesson. Anticipate the change, not just the current condition. Precisely. Wilson smiled. That's what separates good shooters from truly great ones. The ability to feel the world's rhythms and patterns, to sense changes before they happen. Later that evening, in the Spartan barracks that housed the 6 candidates selected for Project Chimera, Sarah worked on new formulas incorporating dynamic atmospheric modeling into her ballistic calculations. Only 3 of the original 12 candidates remained after 6 months of the most intensive training program in military history. Captain Michael Reynolds, a former Marine Scout sniper with 2 combat tours, sat down beside her, peering at her notebooks. More math, he asked, shaking his head in amazement. You know the rest of us just use the standard ballistic tables, right? Sarah smiled without looking up from her calculations. And how's that working out for you at 2,000 yards? Reynolds chuckled. Fair point. I missed 3 out of 10 today. You missed 1. And the one I missed was because I didn't account for atmospheric oscillation patterns, Sarah replied. A variable I should have considered. Reynolds studied her for a moment. At 28, he was 6 years older than Sarah and had seen combat in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Initially, he'd been skeptical of the young female shooter with the academic background. But after months of watching her consistently outperform everyone else, his skepticism had turned to respect and eventually friendship. You know, most of us are just trying to be the best shooters we can be, he said thoughtfully. But you're actually advancing the science. You're doing things with a rifle that nobody has done before. Sarah finally looked up from her notebook. I'm just applying the physics, Mike. Anyone could do it with the right training. Reynolds laughed. No, they really couldn't. Wilson calls you once in a generation. I've never heard him say that about anyone else. The next morning, Sarah implemented her new calculations. 10 shots at 2,000 yards. 10 hits within a 6-inch grouping. Wilson stood behind her, watching through a spotting scope, saying nothing until she finished the final shot. How did it feel, he asked. Sarah considered the question. Different. I wasn't just reacting to conditions, I was anticipating them. Feeling the rhythm of the atmosphere. Wilson nodded. Now you're beginning to understand. The greatest shooters don't just master the science. They develop an intuition that transcends formulas. They feel the shot before they take it. But the math still has to be right, Sarah insisted. Of course it does, Wilson agreed. The math creates the framework. But at extreme distances, there are variables that can't be quantified. That's where the art comes in. He took her notebook and flipping through her new formulas, nodding appreciatively. Most military snipers hit their peak around 35 to 40. Their bodies are still strong and they've accumulated enough experience to compensate for physical limitations. But you, Hayes, you're rewriting the possibilities. Your understanding of the underlying physics means you're already beyond where most elite shooters will ever reach. Thank you, sir, Sarah said, unsure how to respond to such praise from a living legend. Wilson handed back her notebook. Don't thank me yet. Next week, we're pushing to 2,500 yards. Nobody in this program has ever hit consistently at that range. I think you'll be the first. The second bullet found its mark. Hassan al-Ghazali collapsed beside al-Farsi, creating even more confusion in the room. 2 leaders dead in the span of seconds with no obvious cause. The remaining men scrambled for cover, their training finally kicking in as they realized they were under attack. Target 2 down, Sarah reported, already acquiring her most challenging shot yet. Abdul Rahman, the intelligence chief. had reacted faster than his colleagues. As the second shot hit, Al-Ghazali Rahman had already begun diving away from the window, seeking cover behind an interior wall. Now he was partially obscured, only his shoulder and a portion of his head visible from Sarah's position. It was a shot that 99% of military snipers wouldn't even attempt. A partially obscured target at extreme range, moving erratically. The variables had multiplied exponentially. Target 3 is moving, Reeves observed through his spotting scope. Minimal exposure, shot opportunity closing. Sarah made rapid calculations estimating Rahman's movement pattern and the split second when he might pause or reappear. This wasn't just mathematics anymore. This was the art that Wilson had taught her, the intuitive understanding of human behavior under stress. "I have a partial shot solution," she replied, her voice still calm despite the enormous pressure. What she didn't say was that the shot had maybe a 30% probability of success even with her skills. But 30% was better than letting the third target escape, potentially warning other cells and disappearing back into the terrorist network. She inhaled slowly, counting her heartbeats, slowing them through sheer force of will. Her finger took up the first stage of trigger pressure as she anticipated where Rahman would appear next. Just then, Jack Miller, the team's second-in-command, shifted position slightly to Sarah's right, creating a momentary distraction. It was subtle, barely noticeable to the others, but for someone operating at Sarah's level of concentration, it was like a shout in a silent room. She paused, recalibrated her focus, and resumed her shooting stance. The momentary interruption might have been devastating for another shooter, but Sarah had trained specifically for distractions and recoveries. "Stand by," she whispered, tracking the movement behind the wall through thermal imaging. Rahman was consulting with someone, likely security personnel, assessing the threat. He would have to move again soon, either to a more secure location or to issue orders. Sarah felt a strange stillness come over her, a state that Colonel Wilson had described as shooter's clarity. Time seemed to slow down. Her awareness expanded to encompass every environmental factor while simultaneously narrowing to the precise point where her target would appear. 3, 2, 1. She counted down silently, predicting Rahman's movement. Right on cue, the intelligence chief leaned out briefly to issue a command to someone outside the frame of Sarah's scope. In that fraction of a second, she had her shot. The Barrett roared a third time, sending its deadly projectile on the longest and most complex trajectory yet. Sarah tracked the invisible path, visualizing the bullet's arc as it battled gravity, wind, and atmospheric resistance on its way to the target. "Come on," Reeves whispered, his professional detachment momentarily forgotten as he watched through his spotting scope. "Come on." The bullet found its mark with devastating precision, catching Abdul Rahman at the exact moment he leaned out from cover. The intelligence chief collapsed instantly, the third target eliminated in a sequence of shots that defied conventional military doctrine. Target 3 down. Sarah confirmed, already shifting to safety protocol, scanning for other threats and beginning the process of breaking down her position. Reeves stared at her for a moment, then keyed his radio. "HQ, this is Overwatch Actual. 3 targets confirmed eliminated. I repeat, all 3 primary targets confirmed eliminated. I request immediate extraction protocol." The SEAL commander turned to Sarah, professional respect evident in his expression. "How the hell did you do that, Hayes?" Before Sarah could answer, the distinctive sound of AK-47 fire erupted from the compound. Security forces had recovered from their initial confusion and were now sweeping the surrounding area, looking for the source of the attack. "Sir, enemy QRF mobilizing," reported the team's surveillance specialist. "Multiple squads deploying in search patterns. They'll begin sweeping this ridge within 10 minutes. "Pack it up," Reeves ordered. "We're moving now. Standard exfil Road Alpha." As Sarah quickly and methodically disassembled her rifle, securing the components in her specialized carry case, she noticed Jack Miller watching her. The SEAL's expression was unreadable, but something in his gaze made Sarah uncomfortable. It wasn't just the typical skepticism she sometimes encountered from male operators. There was something else, something calculating. The team moved with practiced efficiency, erasing signs of their presence and preparing to withdraw down the eastern slope of the ridge, away from the compound and toward their extraction point, 12 kilometers away. As they prepared to move out, Reeves approached Sarah again. "Those shots shouldn't have been possible," he said quietly. "Not at that range, not in these conditions, not in sequence." Sarah secured the last piece of her equipment. "Yet here we are." "Who trained you, Hayes, really?" Sarah hesitated. Kamara was classified at levels above Reeves' clearance despite his seniority. but something told her that partial honesty might be necessary. Colonel James Wilson was my primary instructor, she admitted. Reeves' eyes widened slightly. Old ghost, he's been retired for years. Not as retired as people think, Sarah replied. He runs a specialized program for exceptional candidates. Wilson trained me too, Reeves said, surprising her. 20 years ago when I was coming up through the ranks, before he officially retired. Best instructor I ever had. This unexpected connection changed the dynamic between them. Reeves wasn't just another skeptical commander now. He was part of Wilson's extended network of protégés. We need to move, Miller interrupted, gesturing toward the valley where dust clouds indicated multiple vehicles moving from the compound. They're mobilizing faster than expected. Reeves nodded the moment broken. Move out, standard interval. Hayes, you're with me. The team began their descent down the rocky eastern face of the ridge, using natural cover to conceal their movement. Sarah kept pace easily, despite carrying her heavy equipment. The physical training in Chimera had been as intense as the technical instruction, pushing candidates to extremes of endurance and strength. As they moved, Sarah's mind returned to her training again, to the lessons that had prepared her for this moment. Undisclosed location, Nevada desert, 4 years earlier. The most important shot you'll ever take isn't about distance or conditions, Colonel Wilson lectured. The 3 remaining Chimera candidates sat before him in a sparse classroom. It's about consequences, understanding the strategic impact of removing a specific individual from the battlefield. Sarah, now a staff sergeant with 2 years in the program, listened intently. Wilson had been increasingly philosophical in his instruction as they progressed, moving beyond the mechanics of shooting to the moral and strategic dimensions. Every time you pull that trigger at the ranges we operate, you're not just eliminating a target, he continued. You're potentially changing history. Removing a key node from an enemy network can collapse entire operational structures. It can save thousands of lives. Or if the wrong target is selected, it can create power vacuums that lead to worse outcomes. He paced slowly before them, his tall frame still imposing despite his age. That's why Chimera exists. Conventional special operations are effective for tactical objectives, but strategic elimination requires a different approach. It requires shooters who can operate beyond conventional limits, striking at ranges that provide complete denial and operational security. Captain Reynolds raised his hand. Sir, how do we measure success if our operations are never acknowledged? How do we know if we're making a difference? It was the question that had been on Sarah's mind as well. The program's extreme secrecy meant that even successful missions would never be recognized officially. Wilson nodded as if expecting the question. You'll never get a medal for your best shots. Your name won't appear in any history books. The measure of success is in what doesn't happen. The attacks that don't occur because you remove the planner. The intelligence networks that collapse because you eliminated the coordinator. Success is measured in negative space in the absence of enemy action. He looked at each of them in turn. If recognition is important to you, this isn't the right program. Chimera operators work in complete anonymity. The shots that change the course of conflicts will be officially attributed to coalition forces or precision strikes, never to an individual. Sarah thought about this. She hadn't joined the military seeking recognition. After 9/11, her motivation had been purely to contribute, to use her unusual skills to protect her country. But there was something almost monastic about the level of anonymity Wilson described, taking actions that would change history, yet never being acknowledged for them. The trade-off is impact, Wilson continued. As a Chimera operator, you'll be deployed only for the highest value targets, individuals whose removal will have strategic significance. You won't be taking routine shots or supporting conventional operations except in extraordinary circumstances. Later that evening, Sarah discussed Wilson's lecture with Reynolds as they maintained their weapons. Does it bother you, she asked, knowing that no one will ever know what we accomplish? Reynolds considered the question as he carefully cleaned his rifle's bolt assembly. I've been thinking about that. My first combat deployment, I was part of a regular Marine unit. We cleared buildings, engaged in firefights, standard infantry work. I received commendations, medals, recognition, but I never really knew if what I did made a lasting difference. He reassembled the bolt with practiced precision. With Chimera, it's the opposite. We'll never get public recognition, but we'll know exactly what impact we had. There's a clarity to that which appeals to me. Sarah nodded. I think I feel the same way. It's not about being recognized. It's about making a difference, even if no one knows it was you. Besides, Reynolds added with a grin, how many people get us say they were trained by the legendary old ghost himself, even if we can't actually say it to anyone? Sarah laughed. True, though sometimes I think he's harder on me than the rest of you. That's because he sees something special in you, Hayes. We all do. Your approach to shooting is revolutionary. The way you combine mathematics with intuition, I've never seen anything like it. His expression grew more serious. Wilson told me privately that he thinks you'll eventually surpass him. That's not something he would say lightly. Sarah was surprised. Wilson had always been demanding in his instruction, rarely offering direct praise. To hear that he spoke so highly of her to others was unexpected. I'm just applying what he taught me, she said modestly. Reynolds shook his head. No, you're taking what he taught you and transforming it into something new. The formulas you've developed for extreme range shooting are beyond anything in current doctrine. You're advancing the entire field. The next morning, Wilson took Sarah aside after group training. I'm deploying you and Reynolds as a team next month, he informed her. High-value target in Iran, nuclear program scientist with direct ties to weaponization research. The elimination needs to be completely deniable, attributed to internal Iranian factions. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This would be her first deployment as a Chimera operative. What's the operational environment? Urban setting, Tehran suburb, maximum range shot from a concealed position approximately 1 in 800 yards from the target location. Reynolds will handle spotting and security, you'll be the shooter. Rules of engagement. Single shot opportunity during the target's weekly travel pattern. Complete operational security required. After elimination, immediate extraction across the border. No evidence of American involvement can be detected. Sarah nodded. When do we begin mission-specific training? Tomorrow. We've constructed a replica of the target area at our Nevada facility. You'll train on exact replications of the conditions you'll face down to the prevailing wind patterns typical for Tehran in that season. As Wilson turned to leave, Sarah asked one more question. Sir, why are you pairing me with Reynolds specifically? Wilson paused. Because he complements your skills. You're the better shooter by far, but he has combat experience and situational awareness that you're still developing. You'll learn from each other. He gave her a rare smile. Besides, he's the only one who doesn't get intimidated by your abilities. The Iran mission had been a success. One shot, one kill at 826 yards. The Iranian nuclear program had been set back by an estimated 3 years, with the elimination of their key weaponization scientist. Officially, the scientist had been killed by internal opposition groups. Only a handful of people in the U.S. government knew the truth. It was the beginning of Sarah's career as Shadow, the call sign she would earn after completing 5 more similar missions without detection, each one striking targets that conventional forces couldn't reach without significant operational footprints. And Reynolds had become more than just her spotter. He became her closest friend in the program, the one person who fully understood both the technical and psychological aspects of what they did. Until Kandahar, until the ambush that took him from her. Bah. The SEAL team moved rapidly down the eastern slope using natural terrain features for cover. Enemy forces were mobilizing quickly with vehicles and foot patrols spreading out from the compound in search patterns. They're moving faster than expected, Miller observed as they paused behind a large rock formation to assess the situation, almost like they were prepared for a possible attack. Reeves studied the deployment through his binoculars. Standard response for high-value personnel, nothing unusual. With respect, Commander, this isn't standard, Miller insisted. Look at the search pattern. They're focusing on the eastern ridges immediately rather than conducting a circular sweep. Someone told them where to look. Sarah had noticed the same thing. The enemy response was too directed, too focused on their specific area. It suggested prior knowledge or intelligence. Our operational security was tight, Reeves said, though doubt had crept into his voice. No communication outside the team, no electronic signatures. Unless someone within JSOC leaked information, Miller suggested, or someone closer. The implication hung in the air. Miller was suggesting a security breach possibly within their own team. We'll discuss operational security after extraction, Reeves decided. For now, we adapt. Change to exfil route Charlie, radio silence except for emergencies. The team acknowledged the orders and adjusted their movement, now heading southeast instead of east, toward a secondary extraction point. It would add 4 kilometers to their journey but potentially avoid the concentrated search patterns. As they moved through a narrow ravine, Sarah found herself walking alongside Reeves again. Your shooting was beyond impressive back there, he said quietly. But Miller's right about one thing. That response pattern is unusual, almost like they were expecting something. Sarah had been thinking the same thing. The shots themselves weren't suppressed. They could have triangulated based on sound. Maybe, Reeves conceded. But they focused east immediately. Sound echoes in these mountains. They shouldn't have been that certain. You suspect a security breach. I don't know what to think. Miller's been my 2IC for 3 years. Solid operator, never given me reason to doubt him. He glanced at her. Just like I had no reason to expect an army sniper to make shots that rewrite the laws of physics. Sarah said nothing. Operational security protocols prevented her from explaining Chimera or her specialized training. One thing I've learned in 23 years, Reeves continued, is that when something doesn't feel right, it usually isn't. And right now, a lot of things don't feel right. They continued in silence for another kilometer, the team maintaining careful spacing and security as they navigated the rocky terrain. The sound of helicopters echoed in the distance as the enemy expanded their search with air assets. We need to find cover before those helicopters get closer, Reeves decided. There's a cave system marked on our maps about half a click south. We'll hold there until dark, then continue to the extraction point. The team adjusted course, moving toward the caves. Sarah noticed that Miller kept looking back at her, his expression unreadable. Something about his behavior continued to trigger warning signals. As they approached the cave entrance, Sarah held back slightly, dropping to the rear of the formation, where she could observe the entire team. Years of Chimera training had honed her situational awareness to exceptional levels. The caves offered good concealment with multiple chambers and connecting passages. Reeves directed the team to the largest chamber, approximately 20 meters from the entrance, where they could establish security and communications. Maintain perimeter security, Reeves ordered. Miller, take point at the entrance. Rodriguez and Thompson, secure the back passages. Hayes, you're with me on comms. As Miller moved toward the entrance, Sarah noticed him reach for something in his tactical vest. The movement was subtle, almost casual, but it didn't match any standard equipment check protocol she recognized. Commander, she said quietly to Reeves, something's wrong. Before Reeves could respond, Sarah's instincts took over. She dropped her heavy rifle case and drew her sidearm in one fluid motion just as Miller spun around with a compact device in his hand. Gun, Sarah shouted, alerting the team. But Miller wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding what appeared to be a signaling device. Sarah's warning caused him to fumble momentarily, giving Reeves just enough time to react. Miller, stand down, Reeves commanded, his own weapon now drawn. It's not what you think, Miller began, but his eyes told a different story. The calculations Sarah had noticed earlier was now open betrayal. Drop it, now, Reeves ordered, his voice deadly calm. For a moment it seemed Miller might comply. Then suddenly he activated the device and lunged toward the team's communications specialist, Peterson. Sarah fired once, hitting Miller in the shoulder, disrupting his attack but not stopping him. Miller managed to tackle Peterson, struggling to place something on the communication equipment. Reeves moved with surprising speed for his age, crossing the distance and delivering a powerful blow to Miller's wounded shoulder. Miller howled in pain, but continued fighting now, drawing his combat knife. It's too late, Miller snarled. They already know your position. Abdul Rahman paid better than the U.S. government ever did. The revelation hit the team like a physical blow. Miller, a decorated SEAL with multiple combat tours, had betrayed them. Had been working for Abdul Rahman, the very target they had just eliminated. You're the reason Reynolds died in Kandahar. Sarah realized aloud, the pieces suddenly fitting together. You leaked our position to Al-Farsi's network. Miller's eyes widened slightly at her words, confirming her suspicion without him saying anything. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Before Sarah could respond, the distant sound of approaching helicopters grew louder. Miller had successfully activated some kind of signaling device, likely broadcasting their precise location to enemy forces. Compromised position, Reeves announced to the team. Prepare for immediate movement. Thompson, secure the prisoner. As Thompson zip-tied Miller's hands, Reeves turned to Sarah. Hayes, I need options. Those helicopters will be here in minutes, and we've got at least 5 clicks to the extraction point. Sarah quickly assessed their situation. The cave offered protection from air observation, but would become a death trap if enemy forces surrounded it. They needed to move, but movement in daylight would expose them to the helicopters. Then she remembered something from her geographical study of the area during mission preparation. Something that might give them a chance. Sir, there's a seasonal riverbed 200 meters west of these caves. It runs for nearly 3 kilometers toward our extraction point, with overhanging vegetation for much of its length. If we can reach it without being spotted, it provides concealment from air surveillance. Reeves nodded. Good thinking. Thompson Rodriguez, you take point. Peterson and I will handle Miller. Hayes rear security. Move on my mark. The team prepared to exit the cave, checking weapons and equipment. As Thompson secured Miller, the SEAL trader suddenly spoke directly to Sarah. I don't know who you are or what program you came from, he said, his voice low and venomous. But Abdul Rahman knew you were coming. He has files on a shooter called Shadow. He's been collecting intelligence on exceptional snipers for years. Sarah felt a chill. The entire purpose of Chimera was complete operational security and anonymity. If terrorist networks had identified patterns and connected them to a specific operator, even one known only by a call sign, it compromised the entire program. Enough talk, Reeves ordered, gagging Miller with a field bandage. Move out. Stay low, use all available cover. The team exited the cave, moving in a tactical formation toward the riverbed Sarah had identified. The helicopters were now clearly visible, 2 military Mi-17s, approaching from the direction of the compound. As they reached the edge of the riverbed, gunfire erupted from their left flank. An enemy patrol had spotted them and was moving to intercept. Contact left, Rodriguez called out, returning fire with his suppressed M4. The team slid down into the dry riverbed, using its banks for cover as they returned fire. Sarah dropped to a prone position, drawing her compact Mk-12 SPR marksman rifle from its carrying case. While not as powerful as her Barrett, the 5.56mm rifle was more suitable for medium-range engagements. Through her scope, she identified 4 enemy fighters moving toward their position, with more likely following. She controlled her breathing, falling into the familiar rhythm of combat shooting. 4 shots, 4 hits. The enemy advance stalled momentarily as their point elements fell. Move, Reeves ordered. Down the riverbed, maintain spacing. Hayes, cover R6. The team began moving rapidly along the riverbed, staying low to use the banks as cover from both ground forces and the approaching helicopters. Sarah maintained rear security, periodically turning to check for pursuers. The helicopters were circling now, their pilots having spotted the engagement. It was only a matter of time before they would deploy additional forces to cut off the team's route to extraction. Sir, Sarah called to Reeves as they continued moving, those helicopters will drop troops ahead of us. We need to neutralize at least one of them to even our odds. Reeves glanced back at her. With what your Barrett could handle it, but it's disassembled and we're moving. Sarah made a quick decision. I need 2 minutes. There's an elevated position 30 meters ahead that gives me a shot angle. Reeves hesitated only briefly. Do it. We'll continue forward and secure the next bend. Join us when you can. Sarah broke from the group, scrambling up the riverbank to a rocky outcropping that provided both cover and a clear view of the approaching helicopters. With practiced efficiency, she assembled the core components of her Barrett, not bothering with the suppressor or some of the secondary stabilization elements. It wasn't ideal, but it would function. The helicopters were approximately 200 yards away, moving in a search pattern. A challenging shot under stress, but well within her capabilities. She calculated windage elevation and the helicopter's movement pattern. Unlike her previous shots at the compound, this would need to target a critical mechanical component rather than a human. The engine intake or tail rotor would be most effective. Sarah settled into position, controlling her breathing and heart rate despite the urgency of the situation. The first helicopter banked slightly, presenting its vulnerable tail section. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared, sending a .50 caliber round toward the helicopter's tail rotor assembly. The bullet struck precisely where she had aimed, shearing through critical control linkages. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The helicopter began spinning uncontrollably, its pilots fighting to maintain some semblance of control as they auto-rotated toward an emergency landing. The second helicopter immediately broke off its search pattern, moving to assist its damaged companion. It was the window of opportunity the team needed. Sarah quickly disassembled the Barrett again, securing the components in her carry case, before sliding back down to the riverbed and rejoining the team. One helicopter disabled, the other distracted, she reported to Reeves. We have maybe 10 minutes before they reorganize. Reeves nodded, genuine respect in his eyes. Impressive shooting. Again. They continued moving along the riverbed, making good progress toward the extraction point. Miller watched Sarah with a mixture of hatred and reluctant respect, clearly reassessing who and what she was. As they approached the extraction point, Reeves received confirmation that their helicopter was inbound, diverted from another mission to retrieve them. Extraction in 5 minutes, he informed the team. Set security and prepare for immediate boarding. They reached a small clearing that would serve as a landing zone, establishing a perimeter, while Reeves coordinated with the incoming helicopter. Sarah maintained her position, scanning for threats, but her mind was troubled by Miller's words. If enemy intelligence networks had identified patterns in Chimera operations, had connected the call sign Shadow to specific eliminations, it threatened the entire program. Colonel Wilson needed to be informed immediately. The distinctive sound of a Black Hawk helicopter approached from the east. The team prepared for extraction, maintaining security, while Reeves confirmed authentication codes. As the helicopter descended toward the clearing, Sarah felt a momentary sense of relief. The mission had been accomplished against incredible odds. 3 high-value targets eliminated at extreme range, followed by a compromised extraction that they had nevertheless survived. But she knew this was just the beginning of a much larger problem. Miller's betrayal and his revelation about enemy intelligence on Shadow meant that something had gone fundamentally wrong with Chimera's operational security. The Black Hawk touched down its rotors, whipping dust and debris across the clearing. The team moved quickly, boarding the helicopter with their prisoner. As they lifted off, Sarah looked back at the mountains where she had made history with 3 shots that defied conventional possibilities. Colonel Wilson had been right all those years ago. The most important shots weren't about distance or difficulty. They were about consequences. And the consequences of today's mission were only beginning to unfold. The helicopter banked sharply, heading toward a secure base for debriefing. Sarah knew that the questions awaiting her would be intensive. Reeves had witnessed shooting that shouldn't have been possible. Miller had revealed knowledge of operations that should have been completely classified. And somewhere out there, the intelligence networks that Abdul Rahman had built continued to operate now, potentially aware of the existence of America's most secret sniper program. As the helicopter flew west, Sarah's mind was already calculating the next shot, the next mission. Because that's what Chimera operators did. They adapted, they overcame, and they continued to take the shots that changed history, whether anyone knew their names or not. The SEAL commander had said no one could make those shots. Sarah Hayes had proven him wrong. But the price of that proof might be higher than anyone had anticipated. The Black Hawk helicopter thundered across the Afghan sky carrying a team whose mission had been accomplished against impossible odds. Inside triumph mixed with tension, 3 high-value targets eliminated, but at significant cost. Miller, now revealed as a traitor, sat with hands zip-tied, his wounded shoulder bandaged where Sarah's bullet had struck him. His hateful glare conveyed both defeat and lingering defiance. Sarah focused on checking her equipment, outwardly calm, despite the profound implications of Miller's betrayal. The revelation that terrorist networks had identified patterns in her operations threatened everything Project Chimera stood for: complete deniability, perfect anonymity, strategic impact without attribution. Commander Reeves studied her with newfound respect. 23 years of special operations had never shown him shooting skills like hers, calculations that outperformed advanced ballistic computers. There was clearly much more to Staff Sergeant Hayes than her file indicated. 60 minutes to base, the pilot announced over the intercom. Be advised, we have a visitor awaiting your arrival. Authentication code Whiskey Sierra 37. Reeves raised an eyebrow at the code. It was a high-level authentication indicating someone well above his pay grade had taken a personal interest in their mission. Copy that, he responded before turning to Sarah. Whiskey Sierra. Any idea who that might be? Sarah nodded slightly, her expression giving away nothing. Colonel Wilson. Old Ghost himself, Reeves said, impressed. Makes sense he'd want to debrief this operation personally given the outcomes. And given his connection to both of us. Sarah continued her equipment check, wondering how much Wilson would authorize her to reveal to Reeves and his team. Chimera's operational protocols were clear. No acknowledgement of the program's existence, no explanation of techniques or capabilities, no connection between missions that might establish patterns. But those protocols assumed perfect operational security, not a compromised agent who had already revealed the existence of a pattern of a shooter known as Shadow. As the helicopter approached the secure facility, Sarah's mind drifted back to her final training mission before becoming a full Chimera operative. Undisclosed location, southwestern United States, 4 years earlier. The desert heat was oppressive even in the pre-dawn darkness. Sarah Hayes lay perfectly still under her ghillie cover, having maintained position for over 14 hours. Beside her, Captain Michael Reynolds monitored the approach routes through night vision binoculars. This was the final evaluation, the test that would determine if they were ready for operational deployment. Colonel Wilson had designed the scenario himself, incorporating every possible complication and challenge. The target was a mock terrorist compound, with role players acting as guards and high-value targets. The mission parameters were intentionally brutal. Eliminate 3 specific targets within a 5-minute window from a distance of 700 yards in high wind conditions, with no room for error. Any missed shot would result in immediate failure. Movement at the east entrance, Reynolds whispered. Target Alpha approaching. Sarah made final adjustments to her scope, accounting for the 15 winds and the changing temperature as dawn approached. The first target appeared exactly where expected, a senior instructor playing the role of a terrorist leader. Sarah fired once. The instructor immediately dropped a hit indicator on his tactical vest, showing a perfect shot to the center mass. Target Alpha down, Reynolds confirmed. Target Bravo moving to the courtyard. Sarah shifted positions, slightly reacquiring her sight picture and adjusting for the different angle. The second instructor appeared, moving unpredictably as a real enemy combatant would. A second shot, another perfect hit. Target Bravo down, Reynolds reported. Wait, something's wrong. Target Charlie isn't following the expected pattern. Sarah remained calm, scanning the compound. The third instructor should have emerged from the main building, but there was no movement. Wilson changed the scenario, she realized aloud. He's testing our adaptation. Reynolds nodded. Classic ghost move. What's your call? Sarah studied the compound layout, calculating probable locations based on tactical logic. If she were the target, where would she go after 2 associates had just been eliminated? There, she whispered, spotting a barely perceptible movement in a window of the northern building. He's seeking elevated cover away from the expected position. The third instructor was visible for only a fraction of a second, partially obscured by a window frame at a slightly increased range of 1,740 yards. Sarah adjusted, calculating the new variables instantly, and fired her third shot. Through her scope, she saw the hit indicator flash on the instructor's vest. 3 for 3, under pressure, with a last-minute change to the scenario. Target Charlie down, Reynolds confirmed. All targets neutralized. Outstanding shooting, Hayes. As they began to pack up their equipment, a voice came from behind them, startling both operators. Good adaptation. They turned to see Colonel Wilson standing just 10 meters away. Neither of them had heard him approach, despite being trained in perimeter awareness and counter-surveillance. You changed the scenario, sir, Sarah said. Wilson nodded. Real targets don't follow scripts. The ability to adapt when intelligence fails is what separates elite operators from everyone else. He moved closer, examining their position with an expert eye. Clean hide, good fields of fire, multiple exit routes, and the shooting was exceptional. Thank you, sir, Sarah replied. Don't thank me yet, Wilson said. You passed the final evaluation, which means you're deploying next week. Iran, that nuclear scientist I briefed you about. This time it's not an exercise. Reynolds and Sarah exchanged glances, the reality of their situation suddenly concrete. One more thing, Wilson added. From this point forward, your results will never be officially acknowledged. Your achievements will exist only in the shadows. Are you both prepared for that reality? Yes, sir, they responded in unison. Wilson studied them for a moment. Hayes, your call sign from now on is Shadow. Reynolds, your Echo. Learn to answer to those names on secure channels. As Wilson turned to leave, Sarah called after him. Sir, why Shadow? Wilson looked back, a rare smile crossing his weathered face. Because like a shadow, you'll be there even when no one sees you. You'll follow your targets unnoticed until the moment of truth. And like a shadow, you'll disappear when the light changes, leaving no trace of your presence except the outcome. The helicopter touched down at a secure facility within Bagram Air Base, a classified section used for special operations debriefings. As the rotors wound down, Sarah saw a familiar figure standing at the edge of the landing zone. Colonel James Wilson, now 72 years old, but still standing ramrod straight, his weathered face impassive as he waited for them. The team disembarked 2 SEAL operators handling the restrained Miller. As Sarah approached Wilson, she noticed subtle changes in her mentor. He seemed thinner than when she'd last seen him 3 months ago, with new lines around his eyes suggesting recent strain. Colonel, she greeted him, formally aware of the protocols required in this setting. Staff Sergeant Hayes, Wilson returned with equal formality, though his eyes conveyed much more. Impressive work today. Thank you, sir. Wilson turned to Reeves, extending his hand. Matthew, it's been a while. Almost 15 years, sir, Reeves replied, shaking the offered hand. Not since that operation in Somalia. You've done well for yourself, Wilson observed. Leading SEAL teams was always your destiny. He gestured toward a nearby building. Let's continue this inside. We have much to discuss, and some of it can't wait. They moved to a secure briefing room, Miller taken to a separate detention facility for formal interrogation. Once inside, Wilson activated electronic counter-surveillance measures and secured the door. Now we can speak freely, he said, his formal demeanor softening slightly. First, congratulations are in order. The elimination of those 3 targets will significantly degrade terrorist operations across the region. Initial intelligence already shows fragmentation among the various factions without their leadership. Thank you, sir, Sarah responded. But there are complications. Miller, Wilson nodded. I know. We've been tracking a potential security breach for months but hadn't identified the source. Reeves leaned forward. Sir, with respect, what exactly is going on here? Hayes made shots today that violate everything I know about the limitations of sniping. And Miller mentioned something about a shooter called Shadow, who terrorist networks are tracking. Wilson looked at Sarah, a silent question in his gaze. She nodded slightly, understanding his unspoken request for her assessment of how much to reveal. Matthew, what do you know about Project Chimera? Wilson asked. Only rumors, Reeves admitted. Some kind of advanced sniper program, supposedly capable of eliminations at extreme ranges. Most of us in the special operations community consider it more legend than reality. Wilson smiled thinly. That's by design. Chimera operates on principles of complete deniability and anonymity. Its operatives conduct strategic eliminations that change the course of conflicts without any attribution or connection to U.S. forces. He gestured towards Sarah. Hayes is one of our most successful operators. Call sign Shadow. Her mathematical abilities allow her to calculate ballistic solutions that exceed conventional limits. Shots that seem impossible to most military snipers are well within her capabilities. Reeves looked at Sarah with newfound understanding. The shots at the compound, over 2,200 yards, 3 separate targets in sequence. That wasn't luck or even extraordinary skill. That was something else entirely. Applied physics, Sarah explained simply. Most snipers work from ballistic tables and experience. I calculate exact solutions for each variable in real time. But Miller knew about you, Reeves pointed out, or at least he knew about Shadow. How is that possible if your operations are completely classified? Wilson's expression darkened. That's why I'm here. We've detected a pattern of intelligence gathering focused specifically on exceptional long-range shooting incidents. Someone has been connecting dots that should have remained separate. Abdul Rahman, Sarah suggested. Yes, Wilson confirmed. As the intelligence chief for the terrorist network, he was methodically collecting data on unexplained eliminations. High-value targets removed with single shots from extreme distances with no attributable forces in the area. He began to see a pattern where there shouldn't have been one. And Miller was feeding him information, Reeves added. Precisely, Wilson nodded. But Miller's betrayal is just one piece of a larger problem. Rahman had already identified the existence of a specialized shooter before Miller confirmed it, which means our operational security has been compromised at a more fundamental level. Sarah felt a chill. The entire premise of Chimera was that no one could connect one mission to another. Each operation was designed to appear isolated, attributable to local factors or rival factions. The good news, Wilson continued, is that with Rahman eliminated, his intelligence network will likely fragment. The materials he collected on Shadow will lose context without his analysis to tie it together. But the fact that he was able to collect that intelligence at all suggests a systemic vulnerability, Sarah pointed out. Yes, Wilson agreed, which is why we need to adapt. Effective immediately, Chimera is undergoing operational restructuring. New protocols, new deployment patterns. He turned to Reeves. Matthew, your security clearance has been temporarily elevated to include Chimera knowledge. Your experience with Hayes today, combined with your history as one of my former students, makes you uniquely qualified to help us implement the new security protocols. Reeves looked surprised. Sir, I'm honored, but I'm not sure how I can help a program that operates outside normal special operations parameters. Precisely because you understand those parameters, Wilson explained. We've been too isolated, too specialized. Chimera needs to integrate more effectively with conventional special operations to create better cover and deniability. Your expertise will be invaluable. As Wilson and Reeves discussed the technical aspects of operational security, Sarah's attention drifted to a notification on the secure room's communication panel. A message indicator was flashing designated for Wilson's attention. Wilson noticed it as well, excusing himself to check the secure terminal. His expression remained neutral as he read the message, but Sarah detected a subtle tension in his posture. "Change of plans," he announced, returning to the table. "We have a situation developing that requires immediate attention. Hayes, you're needed for an emergency deployment." "Sir," Sarah questioned, surprised by the sudden shift. "Intelligence just confirmed that before his death, Abdul Rahman transferred files to an external contact, someone highly placed in Pakistani intelligence. We believe those files contain everything he'd compiled on Shadow and Chimera operations." Reeves frowned. "That changes the calculus significantly. If Pakistani intelligence has that information, it won't stay with them for long," Wilson finished grimly. "It will be sold to the highest bidder or traded for political advantage. Every terrorist organization and hostile intelligence service will be looking for patterns in past operations, connecting dots that should remain disconnected." "What's the mission parameter?" Sarah asked, already shifting mentally to operational mode. "The Pakistani intelligence officer is meeting a Chinese contact tonight in Islamabad. A digital handoff of the files. We need to prevent that transfer by any means necessary." "Distance?" Sarah asked the professional in her already calculating the variables. "Approximately 1,900 yards urban environment, multiple civilian structures in the vicinity. Not an easy shot even by your standards." Sarah nodded. The parameters were challenging, but within her capabilities. "There's more," Wilson added, his voice taking on an uncharacteristic hesitation. "Initial intelligence suggests the Chinese contact is a specialist in pattern recognition and data analysis. They're specifically interested in identifying the methodology behind Chimera shots. They want to replicate our capabilities," Sarah realized. "Or counter them," Wilson agreed. "Either way, we can't allow those files to change hands." Reeves looked between them. "This is moving very fast. What's the operational timeline?" 6 hours until the scheduled meeting," Wilson replied. "We have a stealth insertion aircraft standing by. Hayes would deploy with a minimal support team, conduct the operation, then extract immediately." "That's not much time for planning or reconnaissance," Reeves pointed out. "No, it isn't," Wilson agreed. "But we don't have the luxury of time. Every hour those files exist increases the risk of exposure." Sarah could see the calculation in Wilson's eyes. This wasn't just about preventing the transfer of intelligence. This was about protecting the entire Chimera program, everything he had built over decades. "I'll take the mission," she said simply. Wilson nodded, unsurprised by her response. "The support team is being assembled now. You'll be wheels up in 30 minutes. Sir," Reeves interjected, "with respect, my team just completed a high-stress operation. Hayes hasn't even had time to properly debrief or recover." "I understand your concern," Matthew C. Wilson replied, "but Hayes is uniquely qualified for this mission. No other Chimera operator has her mathematical abilities or her adaptation skills." There was something in Wilson's tone that caught Sarah's attention, a subtle tension that suggested he wasn't sharing everything. "What aren't you telling us, sir?" she asked directly. Wilson hesitated, then sighed. "The intelligence officer's meeting location is on the 17th floor of an office building. The only viable shooting position is from another high-rise approximately 900 yards away. The angle wind conditions between the buildings and limited window of opportunity make this perhaps the most technically challenging shot we've ever attempted." He looked directly at Sarah. "I wouldn't ask this of you if there were any other option, but you're the only one who can make this shot." Sarah understood now. This wasn't just another mission. This was potentially the most difficult shot ever attempted by a Chimera operator, but coming immediately after she had already rewritten the boundaries of possible sniper engagements. "I'll need specifics on the building structures, local weather patterns, and exact positioning coordinates," she said, already formulating the mathematical models in her mind. Wilson nodded. "All available intelligence is being prepared now. You'll receive it during transit." As they began to discuss operational details, a young intelligence officer entered the room with an urgent expression. "Sir, we have new information," he reported to Wilson. "Satellite imagery just confirmed that the Pakistani intelligence officer has moved the meeting time up. The exchange is happening in 3 hours, not 6. Wilson's expression tightened. "That changes our approach significantly. There's no time for a covert insertion into Pakistan." "What are the alternatives?" Reeves asked. "Limited," Wilson admitted. "We have assets in Islamabad, but none positioned for this kind of operation on such short notice." Sarah thought quickly, her mind processing the problem from multiple angles. What about a remote operation? If we can't get a shooter in position physically, could we use an alternative approach? Wilson raised an eyebrow. What do you have in mind? A remotely controlled precision rifle platform, Sarah suggested. I know DARPA has been developing them for situations exactly like this. The XMSRP system, Wilson nodded slowly. It's still experimental, but we do have a prototype deployed with our CIA assets in Islamabad. The question is whether it can be positioned in time and whether its targeting systems are precise enough for a shot of this complexity. The targeting system isn't the issue, Sarah replied. I can calculate the ballistic solution. The challenge is translating that solution to the remote platform effectively. Wilson considered this for a moment. It could work. The system allows for remote operator input to override its automated calculations. He turned to the intelligence officer. Contact our Islamabad station chief immediately. Authorization code Alpha Charlie 79. Tell them to deploy the XM platform to these coordinates. As the officer left to relay the instructions, Wilson returned his attention to Sarah. This changes your role. Instead of deploying physically, you'll operate the system remotely from our secure facility here. But the principles remain the same. Your ballistic calculations will guide the shot. Reeves looked skeptical. A remote sniper platform for a shot of this complexity? Has that ever been done before? No, Wilson admitted. But neither had a shot at over 200 yards to eliminate 3 separate targets in sequence until Hayes did it today. He checked his watch. We have less than 3 hours. Let's move to the remote operations center and establish the link with Islamabad. As they gathered their materials and prepared to leave the briefing room, Wilson drew Sarah aside for a private word. There's one more complication, he said quietly. The pattern recognition specialist meeting with the Pakistani officer. We've tentatively identified him as Dr. Liang Chen. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. The same Dr. Chen who developed the quantum computing algorithms for ballistic prediction. Wilson nodded grimly. The very same, which means he's not just there to receive the files. He's there because he might already have suspicions about how Chimera operates. Your shooting methodology might be of particular interest to him. All the more reason to prevent the exchange, Sarah concluded. Exactly, Wilson agreed. But be prepared for countermeasures. If Chen has anticipated our response, he may have implemented protocols to detect or disrupt precision shooting attempts. With that sobering thought, they moved quickly to the remote operations center, a specialized facility filled with advanced communications and weapons control systems. Technicians were already establishing the secure link to the XMSRP platform in Islamabad. The remote sniper system appeared on the main screen, showing its current position on the rooftop of a building controlled by CIA assets. The view through its advanced optics revealed the target location, the office building where the intelligence exchange would take place. Link established, the lead technician reported. You have full control of the platform, including optics, environmental sensors, and firing mechanism. Sarah took her place at the control station, familiarizing herself with the interface. It was similar to advanced sniper simulation systems she had trained on, but with the critical difference that this would be controlling an actual weapon half a world away. Current environmental data downloading, another technician announced. Wind speed, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, all being transmitted from the platform sensors. Sarah reviewed the data immediately, noting discrepancies between the automated system's calculations and what her own formula suggested. The system's built-in ballistic calculator isn't accounting for urban wind tunnel effects between the buildings, she observed. I need to input manual corrections. As she began entering her calculations, Wilson and Reeves watched with fascination. The level of mathematical precision she applied went far beyond standard military sniper doctrine. Target building coming into optimal view now, the lead technician reported. 17th floor northeast corner office. Thermal imaging shows 2 individuals present. On the screen, the thermal signatures of 2 people were visible through the windows of the distant building. One seated at a desk, the other standing nearby. Positive identification on Brigadier General Masood Khan of Pakistani ISI. An intelligence analyst confirmed, comparing the thermal signature to known profiles. The standing figure matches the biometric profile of Dr. Liang Chen. They appear to be reviewing documents, another analyst noted. Likely the intelligence files on Chimera operations. Sarah focused on the targeting solution, inputting final adjustments for the complex urban environment. The shot would need to penetrate the office window at a precise angle, accounting for potential glass deflection, and strike with enough remaining energy to be effective. Solution calculated, she announced. Ready to engage on your order, Colonel. Wilson studied the screen for a moment, then nodded. You are cleared to engage. Prevent that intelligence transfer by any means necessary. Sarah initiated the firing sequence, but as her finger hovered over the execute command, she noticed something unusual in the thermal imaging. Dr. Chen had suddenly moved to the window, appearing to study the surrounding buildings methodically. He's scanning for potential shooting positions, she realized aloud. He anticipated this response. Adjust and execute, Wilson ordered. We won't get another opportunity. Sarah recalculated rapidly, accounting for Chen's movement. The window for a successful shot was closing quickly. She executed the command. On the screen, they watched as the remote platform fired. The system automatically recorded the bullet's flight path with high-speed tracking cameras, showing its trajectory across the urban canyon toward the target building. For 2 to 14 seconds, everyone in the operations center held their breath, watching the bullet's progress. Then the thermal imaging showed a burst of heat at the target location, indicating impact. Hit confirmed, the lead technician announced. Target neutralized. But Sarah was already shaking her head, studying the thermal readings more carefully. Something's wrong. The signature doesn't match expectation for a successful engagement. The analysts enhanced the imaging, revealing that the bullet had struck an object held by Dr. Chen, not Chen himself. He used some kind of shielding device, one analyst suggested, possibly anticipated the shot angle and prepared accordingly. He's moving to cover now, another reported, and it appears Khan is securing the documents. Wilson's expression was grim. They knew we were coming. Somehow they detected the remote platform or anticipated our response timeline. Sir, the lead technician interjected urgently, we're detecting a cyber intrusion attempt through the remote platform's control systems. Someone is backtracing our connection. Sever the link, Wilson ordered immediately. Complete shutdown of all systems. As the technicians worked to disconnect the remote platform, Sarah studied the final images from the target location. Dr. Chen hadn't been surprised by the shot. He had been waiting for it, testing a theory. He wanted confirmation, she said quietly to Wilson. He already suspected Chimera's capabilities, and our response just provided proof of concept. Wilson nodded solemnly. The intelligence transfer may have been a secondary objective. The primary goal might have been to confirm the existence of our program and test our response parameters. The implications were profound. If hostile intelligence services now had confirmation of Chimera's existence and methodologies, the entire program was compromised. What happens now? Sarah asked. Wilson's weathered face showed rare uncertainty. We adapt. We evolve. We develop new approaches that they won't anticipate. He looked at her with an expression she had never seen before, a vulnerability that the legendary old ghost rarely displayed. Chimera as we built it may be compromised, he admitted, but the core principle remains valid. Strategic elimination through precision, shooting at ranges beyond conventional limits. We just need to rewrite the playbook. Starting with what? Reeves asked, having observed the failed operation with professional interest. Starting with training the next generation, Wilson replied, looking at Sarah meaningfully. Hayes, your operational days as Shadow may be ending, but your value to the program is just beginning. Sarah understood his meaning immediately. Her methodology, her mathematical approach to extreme range shooting could be taught to others. Not everyone would have her natural abilities, but the foundations could be passed on. A training cadre, she nodded, building new Chimera operators with enhanced capabilities. Exactly, Wilson confirmed, and incorporating lessons from conventional special operations thanks to Matthew's input to create better operational security and deniability. He straightened up, the moment of vulnerability passing as he resumed his command presence. This setback is significant but not fatal. Every evolution in warfare meets countermeasures which in turn spur new evolutions. This is just another turn in that cycle. As the Operations Center staff continued managing the aftermath of the failed mission, Wilson led Sarah and Reeves to a smaller conference room for a private discussion. 3 months from now, he began once the door was secured, we're establishing a new training facility, completely off the books, separate from any existing military infrastructure. I want both of you involved. Sir Reeves questioned, surprised at his inclusion. You've seen what Hayes can do, Matthew. You understand both the potential and the limitations of integrating these capabilities into conventional operations. Your perspective will be invaluable as we restructure the program. He turned to Sarah. And you will be the technical cornerstone. Your methodologies, your mathematical approaches will form the foundation of the new training protocols. We'll build the next generation of operators based on what you have pioneered. Sarah considered this new direction. She had always seen herself as an operator, not an instructor. But Wilson was right. If Chimera was to survive and evolve, her knowledge needed to be transferred to others. There's one more thing, Wilson added, his expression softening slightly. The new training cadre will include someone I'd like you to meet. My granddaughter, Lieutenant Rebecca Wilson. West Point graduate mathematical prodigy, just completed Army sniper school with the highest scores ever recorded for a female shooter. Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised at this personal connection. Your granddaughter, sir. Wilson nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his professional demeanor. Some talents run in families, it seems. Her mathematical abilities reminded me of yours, which is why I recommended her for consideration. I believe she has the potential to build on what you've pioneered, perhaps even surpass it eventually. The next generation, Sarah said thoughtfully. Literally. Indeed, Wilson agreed. Our legacy continues adapting to new challenges. The shots that change history will still be taken even if the methods and the shooters evolve. As they discussed the details of the new program, Sarah reflected on her journey from that 12-year-old girl learning to shoot with her father to becoming shadowed the most lethal precision shooter in military history. Now she stood at the threshold of a new chapter, hitting on what she had learned to create something that would outlast her operational career. The SEAL commander had said no one could make those shots at the compound in Afghanistan. Sarah had proven him wrong, rewriting the boundaries of what was considered possible. And in doing so, she had changed not just the outcome of that specific mission, but potentially the future of strategic military operations. As Colonel Wilson outlined his vision for the evolved Chimera program, Sarah caught Reeves watching her with newfound respect and understanding. He had witnessed the impossible made possible, had seen the future of warfare demonstrated in 3 perfect shots across an impossible distance. Some people aren't just shooters, Wilson said, seeming to read her thoughts. Some people are the living embodiment of evolution in action. Both of you represent that principle in different ways. He looked between them. These two operators who represented different traditions, but shared a commitment to excellence that transcended conventional boundaries. Together, Wilson concluded, you'll help create a legacy that will reshape the battlefield for decades to come, not through brute force or overwhelming firepower, but through precision calculation and the perfect synchronization of human ability and scientific principle. As the sun set over Bagram Air Base, casting long shadows across the remote military facility, Sarah thought about Wilson's words: legacy, impact, the future growing from the foundations of the past. The SEAL commander had said no one could make those shots. Sarah Hayes had not only proven him wrong, but had opened the door to a new generation who would continue to defy the impossible, operating in the shadows to change the course of history, one precision shot at a time. And as darkness fell, Sarah embraced her new role, ready to teach others to do what everyone said couldn't be done. 3 months later, undisclosed location, Montana. The morning air was crisp as Sarah stood on the firing platform, watching Lieutenant Rebecca Wilson adjust her position behind the custom Macmillan TAC 338 rifle. The young officer bore a striking resemblance to her grandfather, the same intense blue eyes, the same methodical approach to every task. Remember, at extreme distances, you're not just calculating current conditions, Sarah explained. You're predicting how they'll change during the bullet's flight time. Rebecca nodded, making minute adjustments to her scope. The atmospheric oscillation patterns you mentioned in yesterday's lecture. Exactly. Sarah was impressed. Rebecca absorbed complex ballistic concepts faster than any student she'd seen, even in Chimera. At 26, she already possessed mathematical intuition that most veteran snipers never developed. Across the range, Commander Reeves was working with the other 4 candidates selected for the new program codenamed Umbra. The restructured program incorporated critical changes based on the lessons from Rahman's intelligence gathering. No fixed operational signatures anymore, Colonel Wilson had explained during the program briefing. Each Umbra operator will use different methodologies, different equipment configurations, different engagement parameters. No pattern recognition algorithm will connect one operation to another. The facility itself represented this new approach. Unlike Chimera's centralized structure, Umbra was distributed across multiple locations with rotating training sites and completely compartmentalized missions. Operators would never know about each other's deployments, creating genuine separation between operations. Sarah watched as Rebecca exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The round struck the target 500 yards away, dead center. Good. Now recalculate for a 15-degree crosswind variation during flight, Sarah instructed. Rebecca began working through the calculations in her notebook using the advanced formulas Sarah had developed. The notebook looked remarkably similar to Sarah's own, filled with handwritten equations and environmental data tables. From the observation platform, Colonel Wilson watched them, his weathered face revealing quiet satisfaction. He caught Sarah's eye and gave a slight nod of approval. The program was evolving. The first generation had proven what was possible. The second would redefine it. And together they would continue to change history from the shadows one impossible shot at a time. As Rebecca completed her calculations and prepared for another shot, Sarah felt a sense of continuity, of something important passing from one generation to the next. The SEAL commander had said no one could make that shot. Sarah had proven him wrong. And now she was ensuring that long after she was gone, there would always be someone who could make the shots no one believed possible.